So if you've ever followed my previous My Hero months in the past and my coverage of Tomura Shigaraki, you'll know that I'm a big fan of My Villain Academia, the 23-chapter arc that was covered in the 24th and 25th volumes of the series. I was dying to see it animated with the full talent and power of Studio Bones, but the results I was less than satisfied with. Instead of appearing in its proper place in the anime right after the joint training arc, instead, we get a weird teaser before moving on with the Endeavor Agency arc, completely screwing up the timeline, especially given that the big plot point during the Endeavor Agency is having Hawks infiltrate the Meta Liberation Army, which has now been completely co-opted by the League of Villains. This, along with the cut content from the early part of the arc, made me furious to see such a botched adaptation of such great material. So let's take a look at how the 5th season of My Hero bungled its adaptation of the most iconic and, in my humble opinion, most interesting arcs in My Hero Academia. So what makes My Villain Academia so interesting, or the Meta Liberation Army arc so interesting and good, is how it shifts focus on Shigaraki and the League of Villains, making them the protagonists. Now, the League of Villains has been a consistent threat throughout My Hero Academia, ever since Shigaraki showed up in the USJ arc with a crew of villains and mooks to terrorize the students of UA. Since then, he, along with the ever-expanding League of Villains, have been a consistently growing threat to peace and stability in the My Hero universe. But let's be honest, they always kind of sucked. Shigaraki is a try-hard edgelord who walks around with hands all over him. It's creepy, but also kind of weird and not super intimidating. His crew of villains includes characters like Dabi, the ultimate try-hard edgelord who likes burning people for fun, but not doing much else. The crazy yandere vampire girl Toga, who has the incredible power of cutting people with knives.
Hey man, I cut you up so bad, you're gonna wish I know cut you up so bad.
Yes, I know that's not her main quirk and she can do other shit, but her kind of main thing is mostly stabbing people with stuff and being very acrobatic, which isn't exactly the most intimidating thing in the world, where most people have a superpower. You got the Ninja Turtle knockoff Spinner, who's just a lizard. He's just like a lizard guy, and that's it. He's a goddamn lizard man who can stick to walls. Ooh, beware the intimidating wrath of the Lizard Man! Twice is kind of useful, but is held back by his Deadpool-esque schizophrenia. This is not the team you're gonna use to take over the world. They kind of suck, and Horikoshi does this especially smart thing by telling us, the audience, that he knows that they suck as well. So the arc begins in earnest in chapter 218 of the manga, but in season 5 of the anime it starts at episode 108. But there are a lot of pieces of cut content, like this vignette that introduces Redestro in a commercial before showing him in his office and his far darker intentions. A little Arthur-looking assistant tells his opinion on the signature text of the Meta Liberation Army, dismissing them as terrorists, which Redestro does not take too kindly to, snapping the cute little Arthur-looking dude's neck while crying about him being a good employee, and later introducing us to the other members of his group. This is a much more coherent introduction to the Meta Liberation Army, and it's entirely cut out from the anime. But it also gets worse. All the stuff with Bakugo and Shoto using their hero license to fight some villain who fights with the power of soda gets to stay in, but the kidnapping of the League's information broker, Garant, is cut out. Also, one of my favorite short vignettes where we see what the League has been up to is also gone. This bit is important because it established Spinner's narrative as the framing device used throughout the whole arc. So cutting this bit just throws that in the trash. But this bit shows the League slumming it around, trying to scavenge for supplies as they wander about like purposeless vagabonds. It also introduced an interesting bit of lore to the MHA universe as they face off against the hero equivalent of the KKK, the Mutant Exclusion Community, or the Church of Racial Cleanliness, a group of people who despise people with animal-like mutations and hope to purge them like our poor lizard boy Spinner, a more vile form of villainy than we typically see in My Hero, good old-fashioned X-Men flavored racism.
Jerks from the college, but I ain't putting up with any trouble from their kind.
Skin color prejudice? That's so pathetic, it's almost quaint.
Destroy all mutants with the Friends of Humanity. Who needs enemies?
We don't want mutant lovers in our town, so we're moving you out. Get out!
Try picking on someone your own size.
Ha! Like you?
Yeah, like me.
So it's fun to see the League murder even worse bad guys as they try to pilfer all their stuff as their equipment degrades and breaks down. This is super important to set up that because of Shigaraki's poor leadership and lack of planning, that even with the quirk-destroying bullet he stole from Overhaul that could collapse the hero system, without the resources to produce it, it is practically worthless. He's still got next to nothing going for him. Without All For One's resources and guidance, he's just a mean little edgy kid in a trench coat slumming it on the streets. They lost Kuragiri, the warp man with the ever-so-useful quirk of creating portals. They are literally deadlocked at this point. Even Spinner has had enough, demanding Shigaraki explain what they're doing. They were supposed to change the world. Now the best they can do is hide out in a condemned building, scavenging for scraps. Then Makia shows up, All For One's master servant, but all that previous stuff is completely cut out from the anime. Not like the season is so jam-packed with content that there was no room for it. You had an entire filler episode with the seal guy that was just an excuse to do a beach episode with some of the most popular female fat bait characters. So it's not like there's no room to include it. That's the key thing about My Villain, is it starts off rushed with little context, and the entire 23-chapter arc is condensed down to 5 episodes. The arc is very action-heavy, so it's not surprising, but the confusingly convoluted timeline and cut content just kneecap the arc in terms of pacing and momentum. Probably the biggest sin is rejiggering the timeline. In the 5th season of the anime, they hint at the events of My Villain Academia, but don't go into them until after the joint training arc reaches its close, and instead jump ahead to the Endeavor Agency arc, which is stretched to the limit from its 12-chapter run into 6 episodes. 5 if you exclude the beach filler episode. There is no benefit to doing this. It makes no sense to the viewer as to why Hawks is encountering the League of Villain characters in an elevated position as he tries to infiltrate the Metal Liberation Army. It's unnecessarily confusing. My guess is this is done for 2 reasons. 1, to try and capitalize on the popularity of having the 3 most powerful and popular male leads hanging out and training together, and 2, to do every goddamn thing possible to bend and twist the continuity to line up with the 3rd My Hero movie. So the World's Hero Mission was released on August 6, 2021 in Japan. The last episode of the Endeavor Agency arc, The Unforgiven, aired on July 31st, 2021. One of Horikoshi's assistants even published a short comic to connect with the movie showing Shoto, Deku, and Bakugo departing on a plane and training with Endeavor. So I guess the idea was supposed to be like this. Hey kids, love the My Hero anime? Well, check out the new movie that's directly tied to the anime's continuity. After you finish the last episode, just go into the theater and see the 3 Musketeers go on a daring stealth mission. The anime even went on a 1-week hiatus, with the next episode not airing until August 14th. Essentially, the entire continuity and timeline was tortured to the absolute breaking point to seemingly replicate the success of Mugen Train. While it never reached anywhere near that height, it was the most successful out of all the My Hero movies in the box office, making $47 million, besting 2 Heroes' gross of $33 million, and Heroes Rising gross of $29 million. But throwing the best arc under the bus just to try and superficially chase the success of Mugen Train is just a sad, pitiful disappointment. You made a little more money, but was it really worth it? Like, I don't have any production interviews that can prove that this was the reason they rejiggered things so much. I wish I had some sort of direct source or animation studio interview, but I think given how the timeline worked out, that everything was thrown into this stupid movie as a point of pride for the franchise, but ultimately, this just hurt the arc of My Villain. So I'm going to be honest, talking about art and animation is not my specialty. What I usually focus on in my analysis and commentary is writing, plot, and story structure. I don't have the background or technical knowledge to really do this side of the conversation justice. So if my terminology is off, or if you want to include some factoids I might not be explaining as well as I could, I look forward to your supplemental thoughts in the comments. But it did not feel like Studio Bones was putting their A-team on this season. Maybe they just didn't have the same staff who worked on the much better seasons 2 and 3. Maybe their best guys were working on the 3rd movie, which I do admit does look pretty good. But My Villain definitely got the B-team. So one thing I know is that when adapting manga into animation, the art style needs to be tweaked to something that can work well and look fluid and smooth. The rule of thumb is that the more detailed and complex a drawing is, the more difficult it is to adapt in animation. Like take for example these 2 super detailed images of Shigaraki. I love them. They are hyper detailed, super creepy, and some great work on Horikoshi's part. But when you look at them in the anime adaptation, it's nowhere as cool in the anime as it is in the original manga. But the problem is My Villain is filled with super lazy concessions all across the board. So take the sequence of panels. We got like a huge group of people charging at Shigaraki, an insane swarm just ready to tear him apart. Shigaraki goes into a trance, remembering his past, and jumps on the wall and dashes past the whole group, using his decay quirk to turn them into ash as he runs past. It's cool, it's the kind of thing that feels like you could practically see it as a storyboard for a killer cut of animation as Shigaraki zooms through, incinerating the crowd. But here you have it animated. It has the key panels from the manga, but mostly it's barely animated, just still images cut between each other. It's this degree of laziness and sloppiness that did not define the work of Bones in previous seasons of My Hero. I mean, this is a weekly anime. We're all used to the infamous panning still shot used to save time and money.
Sashimi! Sushi like movida!
Hey. Hey.
But what separates the good stuff from the bad stuff is direction and pacing. Great animation directors are good at pacing, so we, the audience, don't mind or notice it, and it doesn't get in the way of the flow of the story.
Gaston doesn't think he's very suited for army life. His intention is to start a tailoring business with the money he's earned when this war is over. Nicole had proposed to a woman who refused him once. Apparently she didn't want to marry a common soldier, so he declared that he would get promoted as soon as possible so he could ask her again. That's why he tends to be reckless and overextends himself in battle. Looking over them all from up here, I almost think I can see their hopes and dreams flickering in each little light.
Like a bonfire of dreams.
Yeah. And to ensure that those weaker flames don't go out, each man casts his own into the strongest fire of them all.
Here it is just so miserably directed, from awful music choices to the barely animated panels. It's just lame, especially when this is supposed to be such a huge, intense arc. It just has so many moments that are done with dramatic zooms on largely static frames, considering the heights of the series like Todoroki vs. Deku during the school festival, or All Might vs. One for All. To see such great material maimed by mediocrity really hurts. It feels like the production was mangled with the best talent reserved for the movie. There might also be one other possible reason why My Villain did not receive the love it needed. Apparently there was a tweet from the president and CEO of the video game developer CyberConnect 2, Matsuyama Hiroshi, discussing the My Villain arc during its publication, saying that he believes that showing villains and antagonists' sides growth in Shonen Jump is an absolute taboo. Now, this is a guy who's a president of a video game company, a company that has made a lot of anime fighting games, but hasn't made any game associated with My Hero Academia. This tweet has no reason to have any kind of editorial influence in the manga's publication, but maybe he was reflecting a larger and wider perception on how the arc was perceived in Japanese culture. I don't have anything to back up this thesis. It's one that I find a little hard to believe, given that we've had things like One Piece running for 20 plus years and having lots of instances where Oda gave villains flashbacks and sympathetic backstories. But I guess we never saw the focus shift entirely away from the Straw Hats to feature one of the many series antagonists. But I can find hundreds of examples of sympathetic villains in the world of manga, but at the end of the day we have the end results of the adaptation of My Villain Academia, which feels rushed and poorly done and extremely lazy when compared to the treatment of other arcs in My Hero Academia. Which is a shame. I really enjoyed a supervillain fight where many members of the League got the chance to grow and expand their powers as they were put through a trial by fire. I'm glad at least they kept the Shigaraki origin story, even if they could have done more with his power being fully awakened and animating his evil laugh and city destruction. But it's such a shame to see such a beloved series seemingly decaying into mediocrity right before our eyes as the production resources are devoted towards other projects, leaving us longtime fans left with mediocre depiction of some of our favorite moments. I certainly hope this doesn't bode poorly for Season 6, given that it features one of the longest arcs and is literally just one huge action sequence that continues for 50 plus chapters. I think if the war arc is just met with a lot of panning stills of crowd shots, people are going to be pissed. especially in a post-Demon Slayer Season 2 world, and everything MAPPA has done to consistently raise the bar on everything they produce. But that is how the League of Villains was eviscerated, not by another supervillain group, not even by the heroes, but by the most insidious villain of all, corporate greed and laziness. I wish I could give you a better account of what the hell happened behind closed doors. Unlike the American comic book industry with creators posting everything on Twitter, most mangaka and anime staff are pretty reclusive and private. Sometime later down the line in interviews, I hope we get to hear the behind-the-scenes stories, and later in the future we might get a reason for why the My Villain anime adaptation was so terrible and mid. But as of right now, I hope I've given you an idea of what could have been and why what we got was sorely lacking for all of you anime-only watchers. Who knows, maybe 20 years from now we'll get a reboot series of My Hero that'll update the animation and get rid of any filler and fluff, and we'll get to see the glory of the My Villain arc adapted fully without any compromises. But until that day, at least we still have the manga version. For all you My Villain Academia fans, hope you enjoyed that examination of how the anime managed to mangle one of my favorite arcs. While we might not have gotten justice, I hope at the least I provided some sense of closure and an explanation as to why so much content was cut. We Shigaraki fans have it tough. Our favorite arc doesn't get its due in the anime. Horikoshi decides to hand over Shiggy's body to AFO. What's a Shiggy fan to do? Well, why don't you buy this nice Shigaraki shirt I made? Back in the era where for a fleeting second it looked like he was going to be a badass mafioso boss. We can still cling to our memories. Click the link in the description below or shop in the store tab of this video to pick it up at Teespring. Or don't. I can't make you guys do anything. But now is the time in the video where we pay our daily tribute to the great god of YouTube. It's not Susan, or PewDiePie, or Mr. Beast, or even one of those little kid channels. No, it's Stanley Tucci. Michael Bay and the Coen brothers' favorite actor is the true avatar of viral success.
Algorithms! Math!
Subscribe, like, comment.
Do it.
Do it now or else Stanley Tucci will haunt your dreams.
Sit, Jennifer. Your big breaking TV. Welcome to prime time, bitch.
The only way to have a good night's sleep is to boost me in the algorithm, or else Stanley Tucci will come to your house when he's searching for Italy. Special thank you to my patrons for supporting my work. I hope you'll consider joining them so you can see my videos early, plus some super secret videos which will never be released publicly, and I'll see you next video for the final video of My Hero Month 2020, where I take a look at the most prolific My Hero spin-off, My Hero Academia Vigilantes.